Hello, everyone. Thank you for checking out the study of antiquity and the Middle Ages. I'm your host, Nick Barksdale, and today we are joined by a very special guest, Dr. Maranci. Dr. Maranci, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Nick. And I just want to applaud you on your channel. I've been checking it out, and you are doing such great work, and it's such a great service. We all need to learn more about antiquity and the Middle Ages. And these days, it's such a comfort to be learning about antiquity in the Middle Ages. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to better educate ourselves.
So, as I was just telling you before, I'm actually Armenian. I always tell this to my, audiences. I know my name looks Italian, but non sono italiana. I'm actually Armenian. My father grew up in Istanbul, and his parents came from Sivas, which is in the interior, what was Sepastia, Byzantine Sepastia, and Armenian Sepastia. But they came to Istanbul probably during the genocide. And they lived in Istanbul, had a factory. There was a something called the Turkish name change laws in the 1920s. And that took our original Armenian name, which was Maranjan, and it cut it off and made it Marancu. So in Turkish, it's spelled with a CI or C undotted I think. But in English, it looks like Maranci. So, and in fact, that is also, fun fact, an Italian last name. So I seem to have willy-nilly these Italian roots, but I don't really. I'm all Armenian. It's an amazing history, a really interesting and complex one going into the pre-modern period. So although the modern period certainly saw its share of tragedy and serious and complex problems, the pre-modern period is fascinating to study in its own right. And in fact, the more people who can be attracted to the subject and study it, the better. And I'll also say that there are lots of ways in which the pre-modern and the modern are tied together. So, a lot of the medieval monuments that are in, what was historical Armenia, but are now in Eastern Turkey or in Azerbaijan, are very much subject to the fate of modern political conditions. So, you can't escape where you are, and you can't escape the present, but it's important to be aware of why those medieval monuments were important. So it's part of what I do, and I'm glad for that reason to be here.
And to our subs today, I know many of you had requested some episodes on ancient medieval Armenia, and I was happy to oblige. And she is going to take us through ancient and medieval Armenia. But what's really interesting about this is it's also going to focus a lot on architecture and structure, which in its own way gives you its own history. And so, Dr. Maranci, I'm going to let you take it from here.
Well, let me say one thing just to preface, and that is that the study of ancient Armenia, and this is really pre-Armenia, before the Armenian ethnogenesis, so going way back, even back to Paleolithic, is really interesting from a historical perspective because it's messy. You can't sweep ancient Armenia, the culture, the religion, the politics, the society, into any clear categories of classical Mediterranean or ancient Near Eastern, let's say, chapters of antiquity. It doesn't work. And one thing I always tell my students is pay attention to that, because Nick, as you were saying before, Armenia isn't really very well represented, the ancient and medieval chapters in the United States. And that's in part, I think, because it's messy. It does not lend itself to kind of easy, oh, this is just like Persia, only a little different, or it's just like Greece, only it's both and it's neither, and it's doing something different. So I just wanted to start by saying that. And with that, talk a little bit, go all the way back. And I'm just going to refer a little bit to my outline here. So Armenia has some of the oldest material remains that we have in the world. Now, I said to you before Armenia but really we're talking, as I said, about pre-Armenia. We're talking about what a lot of archaeologists refer to as the Armenian Plateau. And this is the high plateau of Asia Minor, and it spans what is today the post-Soviet Republic of Armenia and Eastern Turkey and Azerbaijan, and also the southern parts of Georgia. So just to give you a sense of the extent of this plateau, it's important to realize that. And this plateau was a kind of, if you think about it, it's the highest point in Asia Minor, tactically ideal for defense. And this would be true throughout the Antiquity, Middle Ages, even today, early modern period, even today. This is a kind of strategic point that various powers would struggle for and take it as a buffer state, as a kind of toehold on a frontier. But very often Armenia was the kind of focus for imperial or royal control, outside powers. So just a few words about it as a place. Highly seismic area, hot summers, cold winters, incredibly diverse from a fauna perspective. Great natural resources, copper, building stone, and lots of interesting fun facts like the apricot, Prunus armeniaca, the ermine, that comes from Armenian. It's an Sora armenaca. So one could go on and on. I'm obviously a font of information about Armenian trivia. But as I was saying earlier, so this high plateau was home of some of the earliest human settlements and even pre-human hominid settlements. And some of these go back to 800,000 years old. So archaeologists have been unearthing really interesting finds that go back that far, that suggest settlement on par with what we know from Tanzania. So this region is very interesting and very ancient. From the Neolithic period, and you can see I'm going all the way back, because it's such a fascinating and rich history that that needs to be studied more. From the Neolithic period, we get the kind of megalithic architectures that we see across the world. And you might know of Stonehenge. Your viewers might know of Stonehenge. We have our own version called Carahunge. And it is a arrangement of megaliths or large rocks. Some people think this is an observatory. It could be an observatory. It could be something else. Another kind of megalith that we have is we call it a Vishap stone. And Vishap means dragon. These are megaliths, so large stones in the landscape that are actually carved with creatures, dragons, and different kinds of forms. Very interesting. Sometimes connected to water sources. So some archaeologists have suggested that they could perhaps be traces of a water or fertility cult. We don't know, but these already we can see, though, from this, that in the Armenian Plateau, we can see distinctive forms of material culture that are both connected to what's outside, but also very distinctive. Bronze Age is kind of the golden ticket for archaeologists, Bronze Age Armenia. And this is when we find, and this is circa 4000 BCE, we find the first shoe found at a cave in Armenia. We find wine production very early in Armenia. So some very interesting archaeological excavations are being done from that period. And some American archaeologists from Chicago and from Cornell are doing this work.